The Clippers' Kawhi Leonard, after leading the Raptors to an NBA title, Kawhi joined Paul George in LA, but came up short in the playoffs, losing in the second round after holding a 3-1 series lead on the Nuggets. Kawhi's teammate Lou Williams seemed to take a shot at him during Monday's postgame, saying, "I was in the league preload management." Stephen A., is Kawhi or PG-13 actually the better leader for the Clips?
To answer the question directly, Kawhi or PG, I would say PG, because by default, not that PG is this vocal leader, this rah-rah guy, but it's because everything that I've heard about Kawhi Leonard, here's what I hear about him. He is elite, which we all know. Both ends of the floor. He is a superstar player, but he is one of the most indifferent leaders you will ever see in your life. He is not a guy that is going to galvanize and inspire. He is a guy that is a master at doing his job. And those other responsibilities come with someone else. And because of that, some people pointed out to how that was a huge problem for the Clippers last year. Now, we can't ignore that PG clearly had a problem with Montrezl Harrell and vice versa. Harrell basically told everybody that. But in the end, when I look at PG, because of all the sacrifices that were made by the Clippers in order to get him and all the talk that he's been doing about how he's going to get in everybody's you-know-what, he's got his old trainer back, etc., etc., he's the one guy that could influence Kawhi for Kawhi to influence others. If anybody could pull it off, it has to be PG because of what Kawhi went through or what Kawhi insisted upon in order for the Clippers to ultimately get PG. So it's basically by default, but I would say based on Kawhi's personality and what he has shown throughout his entire career, PG is a bit more talkative. He is a bit more loquacious. He does seem more willing to communicate and talk with folks. And I think that lends itself towards leadership in a lot of ways in the NBA. So I would say PG over Kawhi in that regard. But he obviously has to perform on the court in order for people to want to listen to him.
The answer is Kawhi. And the answer is Kawhi for a very simple reason. Because PG-13 goes away in the playoffs. And that dude can't be your leader. He could be an excellent player. And when I say goes away, he's better than an average starter. He's average, somewhere between an average starter and an all-star. But in the regular season, he's somewhere between an all-star and an MVP. He declines the playoffs. And whatever happened with Kawhi in that last Game 7, or, whatever. Like, some guys have bad nights, and that was a bad time to have a bad night. Kawhi was excellent, as Perk has pointed out. Extraordinary. Through the playoffs for the second consecutive year, because the year before, he won Finals MVP. And that wasn't the first Finals MVP he won. So Kawhi's style is, as you say, Stephen A., that's what the reporting has been. That's what you hear. And I wouldn't dispute it. And it's maybe not ideal. Although, some people lead by example. And if Kawhi is the best at just doing his job, and that's the example he says, maybe everyone should just do their jobs. But the problem with Paul George is he's disqualified because your best player should be your leader. And barring that, a clutch player can be your leader, but not a guy you can't rely on when it matters most. That's why the reporting has also been that the team didn't have a problem with the special treatment Kawhi got. They had a problem with the special treatment Paul George got. That can't be your leader.
Max, you are so wrong right now. You are so wrong in so many areas by saying that your best player has to be your leader, and that is not true. When you look at the Miami Heat, do you know who's the leader for the Miami Heat, Max? Who is the leader for the Miami Heat?
I didn't say your best player has to be your leader. Jimmy Butler.
You just said that. Who? No, he's not. Udonis Haslem is the leader for the Miami Heat. So with that being said, a lot of guys can't gravitate to guys coming up just to show up to work. Your leader does everything else off the court also. And to me, it's a no-brainer to answer the question. Paul George is the better leader. Why? Because he's more vocal. We haven't heard 10 words from Kawhi Leonard this offseason. And when reports come out, they talk about the special treatment that Kawhi gets, being able to take his helicopter to practice, being able to fly back to San Diego to live in his $20 million mansion, holding the plane up, being late. having his own coach on the coaching staff, having his own trainer, everything, just being a loner. So PG, although I don't agree with a lot of things that comes out of his mouth, at least he owns up to a lot of things. He's not afraid to address certain things, especially when it's about himself. It's not all about your leader has to deliver on the court, Max. Your leader is a guy that's going to be vocal. And by the way, the Clippers just invested over $200 million into Paul George. So that means the Clippers are committed to Paul George, and Paul George is committed to the Clippers. Kawhi haven't signed nothing yet. He has a player option for next year. So with that being said, PG is the leader. He has to be the leader, the guy that steps up vocally in the locker room, calling team dinners when they, on the road, getting guys together. That has to be Paul George, because we know that's not Kawhi Leonard, and history tells us that because he wasn't even the leader in Toronto. So that being said, it's Paul George.
I'm not in a position to dispute your locker room experience, who have played on a championship team. When you bring up a guy like Haslam, who's, the Lifetime Heat Award, whatever that is, I get it. He's synonymous with the franchise. We're talking about different things here, though. Haslam, if you want to call Haslam the leader instead of the heart and soul or a culture setter or whatever, there is leadership in that. But when I think of the Heat, I don't think of Haslam. I don't think the Heat are going to go as far as Haslam leads them. I think of Jimmy Butler. And sure, Kawhi should be more vocal ideally. That's not his style. Maybe you need another dude like a Rondo on that team. That's why we were all talking about that, who would have been the right kind of leader.
Well,
but Rondo, notice, I didn't say it has to be the best player, but it has to at least be a clutch player. At least be a dude who shows up when you need him. It can't be a dude who goes away under pressure.
Well, Max,
Max, they just giving Udonis Haslam $2.4 million a year. Yeah. They just giving them $2.4 million a year just to sit on the bench and not to be a leader.
I'm not saying he's not important.
Hold on, KP. Here's the deal, Max. Here's what you're missing. You're not highlighting how bad Kawhi is in terms of leadership. See, it'd be one thing if you were just some normal dude, and you just didn't happen, you didn't have that rah-rah personality, but you went out and you played as exceptionally well as he plays for the most part. But when you are the complete antithesis of that, where it's national news that you actually laughed at a press conference. Actually laughed. Because you laughed, it was national news. Because they've never seen anything from your personality. Because you're you have a penchant for giving one-liners and being gone. Because even when you're a star, people barely talk to you because you pretty much have nothing to say. You literally could work for the CIA. I mean, they look at you like that. It's a different animal with Kawhi Leonard. And when you are that extreme with your willingness to be a little bit, not extremely quiet, non-communicative, no rah-rah and stuff like that, that's where it's taken to another level, because it goes in the opposite direction. When you pay a guy superstar dollars and pay him max dollars, it's not just because of his ability to perform on the court. It's because of the ability he has to galvanize the folks around him. Tim Duncan, with his quiet personality, he was quiet to the media. He wasn't quiet to his teammates. He was a jokester. He played around. He had a great personality. You look at Steph, you look at LeBron, you look at others. There's a difference. That ain't Kawhi. That's a problem.
I'm not disputing that, guys. I'm saying who would be the better leader. In other words, do you have a chance to win a championship if Paul George is the leader of your team? I think the answer is no. But Kawhi's won 2 championships, and both times he was the MVP. And whether or not he was the leader,
he wasn't asked to be a leader
on that Spurs team. They gave him the MVP. On the Toronto team, who was the leader? You want to say Kyle Lowry? At the very least, Kawhi.
Hell yeah!
If you said Kawhi led the Raptors to the championship, that wouldn't be a lie. If Paul George ain't going to lead you to a championship, like if he's the leader, you're running up the white flag. So far in his career, maybe it can change, but it hasn't been the case so far. And it's been largely a result of his play in the playoffs. I take no pleasure in saying that. I love Paul George. I love watching him play. But it's
they were down 3-1. They were down 3-1. Paul George had 26 and 33 before the game 7. You talking about one game. Well, that same one game, your leader didn't show up. Kawhi Leonard didn't show up either.
I'm talking about, by the way, you're right, although Kawhi wasn't hitting the backboard from a corner 3. But you're right, Kawhi had a bad game 7. There's so few bad performances from Kawhi throughout the years in the playoffs.
Go ahead, KP.
Paul George, there are many games, including in these last playoffs, where he didn't show up.
But
Go ahead, KP.
Max, you keep talking about what's going on the court. A leader is more than just playing basketball, Max. Leadership is everything. The whole is making everybody feel comfortable, everybody feel whole. Being able to address situations when things are not going well for you, but things are going well for the team. That's a real leader. Kawhi Leonard is not pulling no one to the side. If Reggie Jackson is having is going through a shooting slump or having a bad 10 games, you think Kawhi Leonard is pulling Reggie Jackson to the side and having a conversation with him? Hell no. Paul George is. Max, that's a leader. It's only one way to paint a leader. It's not just show up and produce 25 and 9 and everybody else do what the hell y'all got to do. Just follow my lead for as my skill set, because everyone is not skilled like Kawhi, but a leader has to be vocal. Has to be vocal. If you ask anybody around the NBA,
but actually,
who's their leader in their locker room, what's their leader in the locker room? Just like in Golden State, Steph is not their leader. Draymond Green is their leader. He's the one that's doing all the talking. He's the vocal guy. He's the one that we hear all the time. Although Steph is the culture, he's the franchise, but he's not the leader. It's a difference.
What I would point out is teams where the leader is not the best player are in a tougher situation than teams where they are. By the way, Steph Curry is not the leader on the team. They were lucky to win one championship against the Cavs before KD showed up and created a power imbalance in the NBA where it was impossible for them to lose. Maybe that has something to do with it. But besides that, this is not a great choice. A dilemma is not just a tough choice. It's a choice between two bad options. These, if you want to paint Kawhi that way, and you may be right, he's incapable of doing it based on your experience, Perk, just showing up and leading by example. He has to be more vocal. It's not in him. Well, then Kawhi is not a good choice, but neither is Paul George. The question is, which leader can lead you to a title? That may be. That's why I think we all thought they should have gotten Rondo. They needed a guy like that. And maybe neither one of these guys are. If I had to choose between the two, give me the guy with 2 finals MVPs, not the guy with a reputation for going away in the playoffs.
Well, let's go to your guy, Max. Let's go to your guy, because this same Kawhi Leonard, you ain't never heard those complaints about LeBron. You ain't never heard those complaints about other leaders. You see guys complaining about him all the time. Well, privately, off the record and all of this other stuff. Why are they doing that? Because apparently, outside of his game, he's having a negative effect on the franchise, or at least he did last year.
Yeah, it could
but Max, you can't move the goal.
You could argue he had a negative effect, although go ahead.
But Max, you cannot continue to move the goalpost to fit your narrative. You can't do that. You keep moving the goalpost. No,
I'm not moving
keep it in one spot.
I'm not.
Yeah,
I'll take the 2-time Finals MVP. You guys will take the guy who doesn't play in the playoffs.
Can I move the conversation?